Alright, so finally it's time for me to cover the Death Knight changes in Mist of Pandaria Classic. Anti-Magic Zone is going to receive a big change, as it will no longer spawn on top of the Death Knight, but instead at a specific location of your choice within 30 yards of your Death Knight. It will no longer last for 10 seconds, but has been reduced all the way down to 3 seconds. In a moment I'll cover the changes and also the new talents you can choose. But first I would also like to highlight that many old talents has now become a spell you will learn by default the moment you pick a specialization. Our global cooldown has now been set to 1 second, and some of our old abilities now also requires death runes. Our Icebound Fortitude has been changed, at least the runic power. It used to cost 20 in Cataclysm, now there's no longer a cost, so you can use this whenever you would like to. Soul Reaver is a new ability all Death Knights will learn, and by using this when the target is below 35%, you will also be dealing a high amount of damage 5 seconds after applying the debuff. And if you kill a target with this, your haste will also be increased by 50% for 5 seconds. Another new ability is Control Undead, where you'll dominate an undead's mind and simply be able to control it for the next 5 minutes. Be aware that its attack speed will be reduced by 30% and casting speed by 20%. What I'm also looking forward to is the updated Dancing Rune weapon. Instead of costing 60 runic power like it used to in Cataclysm, this runic power cost has been removed, and it's going to be so huge. This also allows the Death Knight to be using the cooldown as you're about to either taunt a boss in a raid or simply do your first pull. And when you combine it together with this glyph, well then your threat generation is also increased by 100% while your Dancing Rune weapon is active. Death strikes can no longer be parried, which is pretty useful in the beginning when you're lacking a lot of expertise and hit, but be aware it can of course still be dodged. The duration of our damage over time abilities, Blood Plague and Frost Fever, has been increased up to 30 seconds, and it's still doing damage every 3, but it's going to be a bit easier for you to control these and make sure you have enough time to also spread these. Our Horn of Winter has been changed in Mist of Pandaria. This now only increases attack power by 10%, when in Cataclysm it used to increase strength and agility, which in my opinion were a bit better. Unholy Presence now grant 10% flat haste. When Cataclysm it increased your attack speed, but also rune regeneration by 10%. And back then it also reduced the global cooldown of your abilities by 0.5. Scent of Blood has changed. Successful dodge, parries and mainhand auto attacks have a chance to increase the healing done by your next death strike by 20% and also allow it to generate 10 runic powers. It can stack up to 5 times, allowing you to successfully do 100% additional healing and generate 50 runic power. Sadly, the cooldown of our Mind Freeze has been increased from 10 up to 15 seconds, but the good change is that it no longer costs any runic power. Dark Simulacrum has been changed. It should now apply to all spells in the game, or well, pretty much all spells in the game, because if a paladin is now using a divine shield, it will still not be something you will copy to your own Death Knight. In Cataclysm, Bone Shield used to increase the damage you did while this were active. It has been removed, but what has also been removed is the rune cost when you activate the skill. And the cooldown of your raised dead has been decreased from 3 minutes down to 2 minutes. Next up, the different talents we can choose. Unholy Blight. This is where you will be summoning all these different bugs flying around for the next 10 seconds. They won't be dealing damage, but what does damage is that it applies Frost Fever but also Blood Plague. And this will be applied to all enemies within 10 yards of you. Plague Leech is a bit different. You'll need to have 2 active fully depleted runes and also Frost Fever and Blood Plague active on the target. Next up, you can activate this ability to instantly restore 2 death runes. The last possibility, Rolling Blood. If your Blood Boil does damage to a target with diseases, it will trigger Pestilence. So yeah, allowing you to keeping your diseases on all the targets at the same time without having to use your Pestilence. At level 30, you can pick a pretty awesome talent. An attack that would usually kill you will instead make you immune to dying for the next 3 seconds. But there's also a catch. You will need to receive a certain amount of healing within the next 3 seconds, or you will end up dying anyway. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, Anti-magic zone can now be placed at a location of your choice, but it only lasts for 3 seconds, and it's now a talent you can choose at level 57. What you can also choose at level 57 is Lichborn. Yeah, this used to be a talent you could choose as an unholy Death Knight only, but now it's available to all specializations. Next up, a completely new Death Knight spell. You can activate it from 30 yards away, so when a target is for example about to cast a CC or a heal. It will be stunning them for 5 seconds, and during the stun period you can also damage them without breaking the effect. By choosing this, you will also replace your Strangulate with the stun. If you wish to keep your Strangulate, you could always choose this passive instead. When you apply Frost Fever Disease to a target, their movement speed will be reduced by 50% for 10 seconds, and there's no DR in this. When you use your Chains of Ice, it will immobilize them for 3 seconds, but there is a DR, so starting with 3 seconds, 1.5 seconds, until they're eventually also immune to being rooted. Or you can choose Death's Advice that comes with a passive and a use effect. The passive will increase your movement speed by 10% and allow you to not be moving below 70% of your normal movement speed. When you activate the skill, your movement speed is increased by 30% and you may not be slowed by more than 100% of your normal movement speed for 6 seconds. You can, however, still be rooted in place. Once you get to level 60, you can choose different kind of healing talents. The first one being an active, where you use 5 runic power and convert it into 3% healing every 1 second. But this won't be dealing any damage, and you're converting all your runic power into healing instead of spending this as a way to deal damage. You could of course also choose the other option. This is where you use a death rune to deal a decent amount of damage, but you're also healing yourself at the same time. The downside is definitely that it requires a death rune, but the benefit is that you won't be spending your runic power here. Else, you could always choose Death Pact. This is a 2 minutes cooldown where you're instantly being healed for 50% of your maximum health as long as you have also summoned a minion. In most cases I prefer to choose this because of the big amount of healing and no runic power or death rune cost. Runic Corruption is a pretty insane passive. When you deal damage with Death Coil, Frost Strike or Rune Strike, there's a 45% chance that you will also increase your rune regeneration by 100% for 2.5 seconds. And because it has a 45% chance to proc, it's happening pretty much all the time. Else you could choose the other passive, Runic Empowerment, which also has a 45% chance to proc, but when it procs, it activates a random fully depleted rune. If you would much rather like to time your burst, then Blood Tap is probably better. When you're dealing damage with the different abilities I mentioned before, you're generating 2 blood charges, and you can store a total of 12 of these. You can then convert 5 blood charges and activate a death rune, so in other words, you can store up to 2 death runes at a time. When you reach max level, you can corrupt the ground within 8 yards of you, and it will last for 10 seconds. While you stand this corruption, you will also be immune to CCs, and the insane thing is that you can activate this when you're for example CC'd. So if you're being polymorphed or having another CC casted on you, you can activate this instead of using your PvP trinket. In PvE situations, I much rather like to choose this AoE. It will reduce their movement speed by 15% for 3 seconds, and they're also getting a debuff that stacks up to 5 times. Upon reaching 5 stacks, the enemies will be stunned for 6 seconds, and you will be able to DPS them without breaking the stun. The last option is a mass grip. All enemies within 20 yards of you will be gripped to a specific location. We're talking about either another player or an enemy target. You just need to make sure that the targets you would also like to pull to a specific location are also within 20 yards of that target. Alright, so the Death Knight were also the last class I had to cover in this series. If you would like to see the other class changing videos, make sure to check out either the description below this video or my channel. And soon I will release a lot of other useful Mist of Pandaria guides, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified when I post those. As always, thank you so much for watching and have an amazing day. Peace.